Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Overby. I'm the Senior Options Strategist at Options Play, and I'm filling in for Tony today. But I'm going to make this a short and sweet review. We do have a lot going on in the markets at this point in time, obviously, and we also are beginning earnings season, so maybe the banks can help support the market today. We're currently see the S&P 500 futures down just over 0.5% on the day, but we're also seeing that down movement in the NASDAQ futures and in the Russell 2000 index. And for some reason, it seems like gold has no concerns about going down at all. Gold just hit a new high recently at the 4,000 level. I was thinking that it might pause for a second, but we're also seeing gold up 1/3 of 1%. It blew through the 4,000 level and is now trading at $4,145. So with all this said, we had a bullish up day yesterday, but the VIX didn't really believe it in that the volatility index still held steady right around the 20% level, the good old VIX. And we're kind of showing that that is obviously going to be up a little bit today considering where the futures are at. But we spiked after the Friday move from last week on the announcement of additional tariffs to China. And when we saw, once that announcement came out, we saw a downturn in the market, and the VIX spiked from about the 15% level all the way up to the 22 or 23 level, and sold off a little bit yesterday, but obviously with a decent up move after the weakening of the market. Kind of expected the VIX to come off a little bit more, but this just kind of shows the underlying uncertainty of the marketplace right now. Get a strong bullish up move, you still see the VIX just kind of meander around that 20% level. Now, if you do have any questions, you do want to put that in the Q&A box. I'm more than happy to try to address those questions during the show. I'm going to go through Tony's research report. I'm going to talk about the one stock that has been added, and that kind of goes hand in hand with just the sector performance last week. So last week we actually had only two of the sectors inside the S&P 500 index that actually had a positive week, and one of them was consumer staples and the other one was utilities. So the XLP was up for the week, and the XLU, as an uncle for utilities, that was actually up for the week. And a lot to drive on the utilities is the AI boom and the need for power and everything that goes along with it. So we're going to look today at PCG, which was just recently added to Tony's research report, and we will kind of discuss where it's at right now, what the movement is based off of yesterday's close in Pacific Gas and Electric, and we'll also just talk a little bit more about materials. Okay, so I'm getting too far along without actually saying anything that we talk about today is not meant to be a recommendation. No, past performance is not a guarantee of future results. And as far as options play is concerned, it's important that you read the characteristics and risks of standardized options. It's all available all over the Firstrade website. And also understand that options do involve risk. You can lose your entire investment. You want to think about your risk profile, your portfolio before ever placing an option trade. All right, now let me exit this. Well, that's my information, but let's get into the research report. So the one stock that I wanted to highlight, and we'll roll up here and kind of show inside Tony's research report for the week, that FedEx was removed. They did get a downgrade from JP Morgan, and the stock broke down below support level, so that was removed quite quickly actually from the research report, but when the time comes, the time comes. But PCG is the one that was recently added on October 9th. And also, ELV is a healthcare stock, and I want to give you a couple of my ideas. One of the underlyings that I like that kind of goes along in the healthcare space. Healthcare got beaten up a little bit, so it's a little bit of a bottom fishing play. But with the government shutdown that we had, one of the biggest uh, issues that they're debating in Congress before they decide to fund the government again is what to do with the ACH, the funding of the healthcare plan, and that is a huge debate. And because of that, you saw some of the healthcare stocks sell off. Now, in times where we have obviously extremely weird markets. Weird, I don't know if that's the proper term, but that's the terminology that I would use. In that we keep wanting to set new highs. We have a lot of different variables in the marketplace that could explode at any second. Obviously, any mention of tariffs, almost a trade embargo that could have potentially happened with China. We obviously have the geopolitical concerns that are going on. We are in October, which is usually a very volatile month overall. And we do have earnings going on. So we have just a lot going on. Well, not to mention the government shutdown. And part of the government shutdown, I also want to highlight too, that some of the things we're not going to get this week is we're not going to get retail sales, we're not going to get jobless claims, we're not going to get hourly earnings. These are some of the reports that would come out that are not going to happen this week because of the government shutdown. So before I get into the PCG chart and talk about that opportunity, I guess I'm going to jump all the way back up to here. What page is this so I can come back to it? And I'm going to highlight some of Tony's comments. And Tony sent me this in a private chat, but it does make it hard to just get long anything this week. Even though we have the markets yesterday having a decent bounce back. I was very surprised by the bounce back yesterday. It's hard to just jump into the marketplace on October 13th, which was Monday, and today is the 14th. But with that said, considering the main points, we've got the government shutdown, the escalate of the trade war. Looking at history of the playbook on how to navigate these downturns in October, the chances are current that volatility will subdue and provide an opportunity for buyers to pick up the pieces at lower prices. Now, one of the, we're doing this event on Thursday, but yesterday I kind of mentioned that, I think financials got a little bit beat up recently, and I still do like them. And unfortunately, earnings were all this morning, almost, a good chunk of earnings on a lot of the major banks. But the three main ones here are JPM, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, and any of the deal making stocks. Now, we knew that with this administration, the chances of the markets opening up on deal making stocks was fairly high. And the earnings reports from all three of these companies emphasized that. They all came back and said that the mergers and acquisitions, the IPO market, everything, the deal, basically the investment banking side of the business was up. Wells Fargo actually quoted, to quote Wells Fargo on what was said in the conference call, was up 25% this last quarter. And so right now we're seeing all of those stocks up. Still like those stocks because I do think that they can continue. Goldman Sachs actually has beaten the street now it's going to be the last 5 quarters in a row. Even though last quarter they actually beat the street, we have a long position on in Goldman Sachs as part of our daily play portfolio. And the stock did beat last quarter, but was actually down after the earnings report. People took that as a sell the news situation. So, coming up, the way to approach it is to look more so as let's see what happens this week and try to find some stocks that we might want to deploy some capital in. The one that I like, the industry that I like to focus on a little bit is the healthcare, because I do think that that will get resolved. Well, it has to get resolved, or our economy slash world is going to be in a scary situation if we don't open up the government again. So there has to be a resolution that has to come in that scenario. And then also look at the banks. Like I said, we had the earnings today, so still like the financials, especially in the deal making situation. And then lastly, we actually had some stocks that did well last week. Once again, in the downturn, were the material stocks. As a matter of fact, one of the stocks that had a good week is actually MP Materials. The symbol is MP. And then we had Triology Metals, TMQ, gained more than 185% due to the announcement of an investment by the U.S. government, by the Trump administration, and one of this, and then also, well, I guess I'll say this too: USA Rare, USAR, that stock was up quite a bit, and Freeport McMoRan, which is a a mining company, FCX. And then we got an interesting, actually, signal today inside the options play platform on Newmont Mining. Symbol is NEM. But with gold hitting new highs and a lot of other metals hitting new highs, Newmont Mining will be announcing earnings on the 23rd. And these stocks are stocks that I'm looking at above and beyond the options play research that Tony is putting out. So I want to make this a little bit about Tony stocks. So let's talk about the one that was just added, and then I'm going to take some time to go through a few of the other stocks that I mentioned that I'm actually taking a peek at. So once again, if you have any questions, please do put them in the Q&A box, not the chat box, the Q&A box, and I will try to address them during the show. All right, weekly research report. Let's go to Firstrade options, and let's start with PCG. So I'm inside the Firstrade platform, inside the options play platform or options wizard. I already pulled up PCG, and I actually set up a chart because just looking at the moving averages is fairly interesting in this underlying stock, in that the 200-day moving average in PCG is obviously creating, I don't know, some support and some resistance. So we had the strong breakout. There's a lot of activity right at this current level, right at the 16 level right now. So today we're seeing the market pretty much flat. Yesterday we did get a little bit of a bounce, and you do see that small up candle right here. But when we broke through the 200-day the first time, obviously a strong move to the upside. Stock has came down, consolidated. This is working as support right now. And you can see all the noise right in this range. And let's see if I can zoom out a little bit further. And right here, this is where the downturn was. This wasn't quite a gap, but obviously a strong down candle. But this area is acting a lot as support. Obviously, if we broke down, that would be a bad thing today in PCG. But if we do continue to get that upward move that we received, a little bit of a bounce in the stock, and that continues higher, this is obviously a good area. And then that means that the 200-day did act as support, and that would be a strong upside move to go along with the research report that Tony has put out on the stock, and I'll run to that to just talk about the fundamentals a little bit. So PG&E Corp, right now it's saying the research report is saying modestly undervalued. Forward PE much lower than the industry. But one of the nice things here is we have the earnings per share expected growth is exceeding the market. So now we're saying modestly undervalued because revenue growth is a little bit lower, net margins is a little bit lower, solid down around the 10% level, but the industry level is up around 15%. So there's a little bit room for improvement, and we do see that in the stock price. So here's a little bit longer chart on the underlying stock, and this chart is the area that we were highlighting is right here, right? This is the bottom of that candle, and you see a little bit more of the support going a little bit further out on this. So technically we're at a support level. If we get a bounce, that's going to be a good thing for the underlying stock. We do have earnings coming, and I guess I should have highlighted that on the 23rd. Modest, well, I'll just use the terminology right inside the platform. Modestly undervalued, decent financials or decent fundamentals, and it's in one of the industries where the whole industry on a down week is still going strong. So PG&E, one of the new adds to Tony's research report this week. Now let's go back to here and let's talk about the stocks that I was interested in. So the two stocks that I brought up were Newmont Mining. Let me type in the symbol actually, NEM. There we go. Oops, sorry about that. NEM, Newmont Corp, which is Newmont Mining. But if we look at Newmont Corp, we had a strong move yesterday. We have a bullish CCI trend signal, which is actually one of Tony's favorites. He did a real good webinar on the CCI indicator, but basically saying that Newmont Corp is currently in a bullish trend and recently received a short-term price pullback, which may provide a buying opportunity. So if we look at the chart here, this is the pullback that happened, but we did also now have a pretty decent up day in the market yesterday. So it's kind of showing that that trend has happened. The company is announcing earnings. Well, like most of them, JPM is, in my mind, the first stock that really announces earnings, that really kicks off the earnings season. It's always the financials to start. There are a few stragglers that announce before, but I think that's the first real main important one. And so going into the earnings on October 23rd, with the strength of gold and other metals, Newmont Corp is an interesting underlying to look at and go along with the platform showing that we did recently get a CCI dip in bullish market trend. All right. How are the markets doing? Right now the markets are down. We see the S&P 500 index down right here. Down 0.85%, and that's true across the board. The Nasdaq is down 1%, and we're seeing the Russell 2000 leading the way, down about 1.57%, and we still have gold up at this point in time. All right, so the last stock that I wanted to bring up, and this is once again a protective stock to me, and it's United Healthcare, UNH. Made a strong move. I should say Berkshire Hathaway at this point in time. Warren Buffett is retired, but Berkshire Hathaway came in over the last quarter or so and bought about $1.6 billion worth of United Healthcare. Like I said, the industry is usually considered a safe haven in times of economic struggle, which it's really hard to say that we're struggling economically by looking at the markets, that's for sure. But healthcare has done well to go along with it, and you couldn't, excuse me, and you couldn't tell by looking at gold prices. So if I pull up the chart on United Healthcare, there's an obvious gap, and I've been highlighting this for some time now. And I'm going to focus right here on the gap that has happened in United Healthcare. So from let's call it 330 all the way up to 372, and we saw that gap fill. And if you come right over here, we went almost to the dot. 374 was the very high in that candle, and now we've had the sell off. 200-day moving average coming into play, and we see that may be acting as support, and got a little bit of a green candle yesterday. So right now in the short term, the potential move back to fill this gap, and every time we bump up against a resistance line, it gets harder and harder for that resistance to hold. But at this point in time, from this area up to that area, what is that, about 16-point move to get back to that area? And then obviously, if that can happen and break through, then you go all the way back to this gap, which was the big down day in United Healthcare when they said they were doing funny things with their Medicare payments, and that's when that first big downturn happened. Also, other things that are happening in United Healthcare is you're seeing a lot of insider trading on the good side of things. Big names, CEO of the company, chief financial officer, buying the stock, and this was actually ahead of the Warren Buffett news. So those are some other things that have occurred, I guess, in United Healthcare. So it's hard to get long stocks at this point in time. There are sectors that are doing okay. Healthcare is usually a flight to quality, if you will. The market hasn't done that well since the beginning of the year, starting to build a little bit of strength. Saw the news happen with the government shutdown and the Affordable Care Act being a big target inside of that has maybe produced a buying opportunity. But then again, you never know what Congress is going to do. So playing it based off of the news, but I do think United Healthcare has some more room for the upside, even in the longer term. But in the short term, obviously trying to fill the gap to get back to where it just was at. And then you have the mining. Newmont Mining is right now doing okay, right? Stock bounced just recently, but it's definitely not doing as strong as gold has. Gold has outperformed all the markets across all the small caps, large caps, everything since the beginning of the year. Gold has been the play, and I think some of the miners might be the play going forward. It has happened. We see the strong upward trend in Newmont Mining, and actually we can pull this chart out. But right now we did see a little bit of a pullback, and now we're looking at a new buying opportunity as the company heads into earnings. So that would be the other sector to be interested in. And then the new stock that Tony added this week in the utility space, anything in the energy space has done well, and I think will continue to do well if the AI momentum continues. Maybe with all the deals that are happening, and that actually got mentioned in, and I should have brought that up, but that also got mentioned in a lot of the earnings reports this morning from Goldman and Wells Fargo, all of the M&A that is going on where all the companies that are in the AI space are investing in each other, it seems like, and trying to build that space out. So, all right, any other questions before I call it a day here? Right now, we have the futures market once again just trading up basically the same, a little less than 1% in the SPX, a little more than 1% in the Russell, and we got the Dow and the NASDAQ right in the middle, down on this. And well, we'll see if the financials can kind of support the market today. The financial, the strong news and the strong move. It's a little bit. Considering how strong the financials were this morning, to see the futures down is a little bit of a scary scenario, honestly. Okay, then one last question. Can you please look at the SPY longer trend? As far as the longer term trend is considered in the SPYs, we do have a bullish outlook, but I think to summarize what Tony even mentioned at the beginning of the research report is that in the short term, it's hard to be buying and getting bullish. You can target some sectors, as we looked at here, but I think the path of least resistance going in at least to the end of October is going to lean to the bear side. There's just too much uncertainty in the marketplace. The only reason that I could ascertain that the market was up on Monday was because of a tweet saying, just relax in general, that all the tariff news and the 100% tariff and basically trade embargo with China that were coming up, it's not going to affect the markets. And for some reason, that was enough to stabilize the market, even though we're still in the middle of a government shutdown. Still have a lot of questions as to when the government's going to be open again. We're not getting any financial data to try for the Fed is actually going to be going in its quiet period soon, and they have no data to help support should they raise or lower interest rates at the next meeting. So a lot of uncertainty is just in general in the U.S., not to mention the geopolitical stuff that's going on. All right. Oh, see a lot of questions popping up. So longer term trend bullish going into the new year. Shorter term trend in the SPY CS by going by your initials is shorter term trend is I think I would lean to the downside. If I were to do a trade today in the SPY, it would be a bearish trade. Uh, Martin Martin asks, which assets do you find most conviction in the short term for stronger moves? Well, obviously the gold and the play that I mentioned, Martin, is Newmont Mining. So Newmont's going to be announcing earnings, very speculative play. Now, once again, I want to emphasize this on Firstrade is we don't know exactly who's out there and who's listening to this event. So this isn't meant to be a recommendation, even though we're using real numbers. You need to make sure it fits in your portfolio. But the short term, the most conviction is in the metal stocks and the rare earth metal stocks. Newmont Mining, I think, has some room for upside based off of the movement in gold and some of the other metals that are doing really well. In which sector should you invest this week? This week, the two sectors that I mentioned that were up, I think are strong sectors, right? Consumer staples. Consumer staples are stocks like Walmart, Costco, what else is in there? PG, Pepsi. Those are the consumer staples scenarios, and those stocks were the one stock or well, the one sector, the XLP that was actually up last week, and then obviously the utilities. So who asked that? Which anonymous asked that, and I guess that's what this whole summation was about, looking at a mining stock, looking at a utility stock that might be in there. So the whole presentation was kind of centered around sectors that might be interesting. And then obviously the healthcare. And the healthcare is more of a play on the government opening up, right? So United Healthcare, if you're looking for a weekly trade and you do think that the government issues and the government will get opened up and they'll kick the can down the road at least and fund the government in the short term. But the ACA is a big reason the Affordable Care Act is one of the biggest talking points in the government shutdown right now between Republicans and Democrats. All right, I guess that's it. Okay, well, thanks for putting up with me. Tony will be back next week. He'll be back from his travels and he will be back in charge. And I guess until the next time, thank you and be safe out there in this government shutdown.